Well, hello everyone, welcome to a terrible tales of gaming horror. Today we're talking about The Type. Now today's tale is a bit weird for me because it's actually supposed to have been the last story currently in the series before I did a video about the bad points about myself. Because I feel you can't tell these kind of stories without at the end talking about the bad points about what is your problems. And usually I like to tell these stories in sequence, but this particular issue has been bugging me so much recently that I decided to just tell the story. On top of that, this is a kind of a get it off my chest to the group kind of thing, because I know one of the members watches my videos on and off, and usually I like to do these in person, but the group has, at least for me, they don't like to offend anybody. All right, and for me to tell them in person and tell them here to me because of that reason is no difference. Alright, and on top of that, I also feel that I don't want to associate with this person. Alright, and I'm not willing to associate with him anymore. And me turning up, I tried one time to go back, I didn't even turn up on that day, but it just felt weird. It just didn't click anymore, It was just uncomfortable. It just felt uncomfortable even. So this is also just a reason to them as to why I feel this guy causes all these issues with me, that I would literally leave the group of people that I more than likely, I mean, everybody has issues with everybody, but I like playing with them, but they're still left. And these are the reasons why this particular person has caused this decision, basically, in my view. So let's get into it. So I met this person who we'll call Pei, and we were splitting up groups, and basically one guy had brought this word animal pork, and I thought, hey, why not? So we played a 3-player game of that, and like I said, always that I'm looking for a normal person, not a saint, and he performed admirably in that sense. Alright, and it all went well. He was a bit quiet on that day, first time, but that was alright. Normal gamer, basically, which is good. That's a thumbs up. In the subsequent weeks, I can't remember how many times, I know it's not that much, I invited him to my Friday group, which is a private home, where mostly these people like to play heavier games, war games and all that. So that was actually my mistake, that I didn't get to know him well enough, and that Friday group was actually telling me to go look out for people, and I just jumped the gun in what I usually would do and invited him. And so he came over and he became a regular there too. Then of course, some of the issues did come up. First thing to note about this story is that a lot of the early, because I have to tell it from what's beginning to the end of, a lot of the early stuff is minor stuff that it's not a deal breaker, but like I say, a lot of these little stuff adds up to the big things at the end. Alright, so you have to bear that if you're thinking like, wow, that's not much a thing to be, to literally leave a group over. Just listen to the end first. Alright, straight away from the start, that became one of those minor issues is redundancy. Alright, here's the thing, he's not the only culprit. There's quite a bit of it going around, in that not everybody is super sociable, or that many people are willing to act up into team and all that. So sometimes they compensate by saying the most obvious thing, or even completely redundant things. To give an example of this, you play, like example, Civilization, Sid Meier's Civilization, the board game, and you would say like, oh, I'm thinking of attacking you, then he would say like, oh, haha, you shouldn't attack me, I got tanks. Okay, then you look and you go like, and you say, oh, tanks are strong, right? And you the kind of thing where you look and you can't even really reply, you just kind of go like, huh, yeah, and he does it quite often. Again, this is totally minor, it's not a deal breaker at all, but the thing is that once he's comfortable, he kind of goes on and on and on about it. And the best example of this redundancy and kind of joke that doesn't, like a comedian that doesn't get his jokes enough funny, is a Game of Thrones game I played with him. Alright, at the time we were playing this, actually at the Monday group, we were playing, and I was playing Greyjoy. With basically they had the Kraken symbol. Alright, and when I play, I admit this about myself. I do get into the theme, and I like when I play Game of Thrones, I'm playing the TV show. You know, it's a bit serious, and I will use the voice. And I might not do the voice well, but I'll be like, "Well, Your Grace, maybe we could discuss this issue with a little military situation you might be needing." You know, that kind of thing. I'll do it like that. And he doesn't do the voices, like I said. Then there comes a little bit of compensation where he kept trying to be funny, but he kept from across the table. I would do any negotiation. All I could hear was him going squid. You know, squid, 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 squid. Fuck, seriously. Throughout the whole game, it didn't matter who I was discussing with. When I opened my mouth or even looked somewhere, I would hear squid. You know, you got to make sure he gets squid from him. You know, I was so frustrated at one point by this comment that I actually looked at him, and he's like, he said something about squid again. And I looked him dead in the eye and I said, "You know, the Greyjoy's main trade in the books is not squid, right?" You know, and it was just frustrating. And you know, and like I said, it's like a comedian who doesn't get his jokes not funny. Throughout the whole thing, I was ignoring it, but he kept going on and on and on about it. All right. So that's the first thing, is that, you know, he would say things and people would just look and go, just kind of smile, because it's kind of hard to reply to these redundant things that he says. Another thing that usually came out, and this is one of my biggest problems with him, he literally uses the line, "I am the type of guy who something something something," you know, and it would very impossibly, the guy seemingly, if he was really the type that he kept talking about all these situations, he used this line, he would be the perfect gamer. You know, to give you an example, we would play like Zolkin or something. He said, you know, Ben, I'm the type of guy that, you know, I like all those games that reward a very strategic mind, you know. And then one day we were playing Arabian Nights, and to be absolutely honest, he failed terribly at that storytelling. You know, I mean, literally he kept picking things like, his story was so forgettable. Like, ask him or ask any of the people in the game, no one remembers his story. You know, he was just picking anything on the card. Like, there was this card event that he just kept picking when it came to it. His story was never elaborated on Torn and anything like that. And he, again, throughout the whole thing, he kept making redundant comments on other people's stories that we just kind of looked and smiled. And throughout, at the end of that whole game, because, you know, we all made our own stories, we're having fun. He's like, in the end of the game, we were sitting down there as the game was being packed up. He's like, "You know, Ben, I'm the type of guy, you know, I like games that have very good stories." You know, literally, 1 minute you're super Euro gamer, next minute you're a super thematic gamer. It's like, what are you? You know, it's like literally you just sit there and he's every type of gamer. And the biggest thing is that when he can't perform up to it, he still can't see it. There's going to be a story on this game. It's a very interesting story in my view. Alright? And I still like everybody minus this guy in the game. But it just didn't turn out. We were playing Twilight Imperium 3. You know, he loves to say how he's the kind of guy who doesn't mind you know, hitting people, attacking people in games, and like he said, like he likes to stir shit, basically. You know, like that means basically in Singapore, cause trouble in games. All right. In TI3, he kept saying that these kind of things. I'm the type of guy who's not going to be offended. I like to attack people. It came time at one point where it made everybody at the table agreed. He was in the prime position to hit the most dangerous person. This particular person is so good at games, alright, that he almost always wins. And he was in a good position, and this guy, Pei, because of a deal they made, alright, his border wasn't that protected. And then this event came out, and it would have been perfect to hit this guy, and because it would literally destroy one of his space stations and his building facilities, which would have been huge. And all of us were like, this is the point, you have to do it. I know, I was thinking my head stir shit, right? He didn't do it. And he's like, "Oh no, I can't," you know, and he gave some lame ass excuse like, I made my promise and all that kind of thing. But it's like, that's the perfect time in this game. You know, then that game devolved, and that story will come later. And in fact, going back to the Game of Thrones story, same situation whereby this same particular guy who never loses games usually was basically at 6 castles. You need 7 castles in Game of Thrones to win. alright, and he was playing Baratheon, and he attacked the south, and he was attacking into lands which the only person that could reach him was Pei's Tyrell army. Alright, there were 2 castles near him. Alright, and I basically turned to him and I said, you need to attack him. Alright, if you don't, he's just going to win the game. Instead of going to the east, Pei went to the west to take another redundant island. And then I turned to him and was like, why won't you attack? And then he said like, oh, you know, Ryan's going to win anyway. Alright, so I'm going to do my own thing. You see, and again, you have to remember, he's the type that likes to stir shit, blah blah blah, and all that. Alright, and then the game of course ended with Ryan winning. And you know, what happened was, of course, Ryan did in the end had to fight Pei's army at one point. And then the end of the game, you know, Pei turns to me and he goes, oh, you know, I could have stopped Ryan, you know, all I needed was to have this many more army. Yeah, you could have had the army, you could even took, maybe, you see, the thing is that more than likely Pei were lost. I totally agree with that. But the matter is, he also could have won. But because you brought redundant units to the west instead of going to the east, then of course Ryan won, because he had no opposition there anymore. He only needed to defeat 1 army instead of 2, which the other one only had 1 unit, but who knows what might have happened, right? And again, you see how at the end of the game he suddenly turns around and then he makes excuses for he's the type that likes to cause trouble, but yet, you know, doesn't cause trouble. You know, when it came time for him to perform as he says his type, he doesn't do it, and that's just freaking annoying, because you just sit there and whenever he says these things, all you literally do when he's good. If you tell him he's not, he'll give all kinds of excuses, and you just basically are sitting down and going like, I'm that type, and you will go, oh, okay, yeah, you're right, so that he will just finish his story. You know, he just can't see what he's not, and to him he's just everything, it seems. You know, I'm just, from a standpoint of trying, especially when later on, this is important for the fact that when you try to tell him his problems, he just doesn't want to recognize it, basically. And so because he can't recognize it, he can't change. But of course, that's up to him. You know, maybe I'm the one that's wrong. Who knows? Alright, it's up for you to judge. And the other big thing that for me is, of course, like he has this, to me, completely stupid thing where he says, I want my collection at 10 games, and that's it. You know, and that's fine. That's absolutely his prerogative. The problem with that is he tends to do a thing which is, there's a lot of people in that Monday group which is fantastic. They literally will spend the money to buy games, learn the games, teach the games, and play the games. And whenever he sees a game on, be it Dice Tower or whatever he watches, he wants to try a game, right? His first line on the message boards on WhatsApp or whatever it is, it's not like, I'm thinking about buying this game. It's usually, and most of the time, it's always usually, who's going to buy this game? It's like it sounds almost like an obligation. Like, he would put there, like, oh, has anybody tried, example, this game? Then after that, people will talk about it, and it's like, anybody wants to buy it? Anybody going to buy it? Of course, later on, as I talked about this guy, as he fell out of favor with me, people kept telling me, oh, but he does buy this game. And then, do you see he was going to buy this game? They kept telling me he's going to buy Aquasphere, blah, blah, blah. I don't know whether he got Aquasphere, but, just because he buys a game once in a while is not the issue. My issue is that he literally, most of the time, he's expecting someone to get the game. He's literally, almost like spoiled, because many, especially the leader of the group, buys a lot of games. It seems like he just expects to play these games without having to invest any effort into it, which I'll go into now, which is an issue which caused no end of problems with him and me, which is rules. Alright, this guy literally will not put any effort to learn a game's rules. To give you an example of this, we were playing Trajan. We had arranged Trajan almost a week or more in advance, and many times he would turn out completely blank. His excuse is always the same. I'm the type of guy who can only, again, the type. I'm the type of guy who can only learn games by playing at the time and all that, you know. And here's the thing: most players, regardless, they would turn up at the game. At least they would kind of watch a video with the Dice Tower to know what the game's about how the system works. He turned up blank. All right, and with the Trajan one, I purposely didn't put it up, but I actually typed in like Trajan board game rules, how to play Trajan, and within the top 5, you can try it now. All right, you will find a BG Board Game Geek video on how to play Trajan that's 19 minutes long. He had over a week to just invest 19 minutes to learning the rules. All of us did this. All of us, and of course some people were already new to play the game. He turned up, no idea. Not even willing to have it. That meaning he had not even researched or even bothered to learn the game. He just turned up, expected all of us. And here's the thing, it's always the same thing. It really annoys me that you don't put in the effort, and all of us, even I sent a message purposely that, hey, if you can go look up the rules, at least some basis on that, you know. And so every time it turns up, most of us who have gotten about a rough idea about how to play the game, and then we always have to wait for someone to explain the games to him. So literally he's always wasting some people's time with having just to explain to him what it is, you know. And in fact it got to such a point that he's so lazy to learn rules, alright, that one time he bought the game Seasons, alright. And the thing is with me is he had already joined my Friday group, alright, and because one of the hosts is a guy who provides his house and he buys all the games and he also learns rules, I always help that guy. Or, you know, he would tell me like, okay, these are a few games, can you read the rules for me? And I'll do that for him, very open, you know, just to help alleviate that guy's pain of, you know, let's be honest, reading rulebooks is not the most fun hobby in the world. He was about to get a game of Season and he's like, oh, when I get it, can I pass it to you and you read the rules for me? And I literally went in my head, it's not kidding, my head literally went, fuck no. Yeah, right, but I just look at it and go like, oh no, I'm too busy. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's an absolute laziness. And, you know, he's like, I want to play the game, but I don't put any effort into it, which will lead into the last, like I said, all these little things you're hearing now leads to this big thing that happens at the end. In between all this, when the time when he, you know, this is all in the Monday group situation. In the Friday group situation, which actually, you know, again, my mistake of inviting him, when I started to notice all these little issues, which, like I said, they're not deal breakers, but they're very, because they happen quite often, they kind of get on your nerves. I always felt that you should talk to a person. Prevent the problem is better than curing it. I truly believe that. I always take that line to heart. There are 3 times which, one of the times was after he got the game Seasons, alright, and he had promised that basically he was going to table it, and people were always like, okay, I'm joining in into, I'm in for Seasons next week, blah blah blah. And the first week that he promised it, the next week he didn't table it, and I actually asked him why, and he's like, he gave some lame ass excuse, you know, I wanted to try this other game, blah blah. Then that same week at the end he's like, I'm going to bring Seasons. And the second week, again, he didn't table it. Same thing, he wanted to try some other game. You know, and he kept promising but never delivering. Alright? And so I basically, during the Friday group, I actually just turned to him and said like, hey, you know, no offense, but I'm telling you, you shouldn't keep promising games and then not tabling it. It's not right. You know, talk to him about it. Then he of course tried to defend himself, and I'm like, you know, I'm not saying what it is. If maybe they are totally fine with it. I'm just telling you, I don't think it's good behavior, basically. You know, it was a bit awkward, but we got by that. Then after that, again for the Friday, again, there are 3 times which I talked to him in person to change certain behaviors which I felt was a problem. The second one was when we had arranged a game. I believe it was going to be a Saturday, Cosmic Encounter, alright, and we promised a certain time, and he turned up late, alright, and you know, it wasn't kind of normal late, it was like half an hour to an hour kind of thing. And so I told him like, you know, just be honest here, you cannot promise at a certain time and then not turn up. Next time you try to be on time, basically. because everybody was literally waiting for you, and we couldn't start a game, because if we started a game then you turned up, then it became awkward. What you gonna do? And he's like, oh, just start without me and all that, and you're like, no, but just try to be on time. And then, you know, then I thought it was all settled, right? You know, then we arranged another game, all right. And here's the worst part, it's not even within, I believe, 2 weeks. All right, we arranged another game in the same Friday group, but it wasn't for, I think because new some holiday, we were playing on another day, and he just literally did not turn up, you know, and he didn't reply to I think messages or whatever. And he said that he had gone for a rock climbing thing or whatever it is, and he basically fell asleep. All right, and he didn't see the message till it was late. Then he called and he's like, oh, you know, I'm sorry, blah blah blah. And that's the thing, it's like, I talked to him again on this, like, you can't just not, you know, keep promising and not turning up, and you got to learn to organize, for God's sake. You know, it's like, you want to go rock climbing and everything, that's fine, but if you know you're going to be tired, don't promise to turn up then, you know, either just say like, don't plan me in first. But here's the thing, he wants to play games, and he doesn't want to be left out. This third time I talked to him, I said, you can't keep doing these things, you know, it's not right. Here was his solution, which you know, his solution was, okay, next time I promise, alright, if I don't turn up by the time, just start without me. That's not the fucking problem. The fucking problem, especially with the Friday group, alright, is that they want specific number of players. Like, there's a guy there who, if the game box says 3 to 6, he wants to play 6 players. So literally, you not turning up turns the entire session over upside down, alright? And here's the thing, what if you do turn up half an hour later? Now everybody feels awkward having to watch you sit there, especially with the games we played there, it's usually like 4 or 5 hours, alright? It's just not a solution, and it's lazy. It's like, literally, you can't, you know, if you don't want to commit, don't commit, you know. And he will plan all these things together, and then he just, like, almost it feels like at his convenience, he would turn up when he wanted to. And here's the thing, he has a bike. The rest of us usually had public transport we take over. In fact, he's so well known for being late. There was another person which I respect quite a bit, who told me, you know, when I was still playing with this particular guy called Pei, you know, he told me like, don't worry, he's not gonna turn out on time. You know, we were waiting for a third person to start the game, and he's like, don't worry, that guy's not gonna turn out on time. Alright? You know, that's his reputation, in fact. It's like, oh my god, I mean, seriously, is this the kind of reputation he wants? And so after talking to him those 3 times, basically we started to have snide comments against each other, alright? Because here's the thing, I already talked to him 3 times, I saw none of the behavior being changed, so and of course all those little minor problems came up, going on, and so both of us must have had issues with each other. So, you know, I must admit, I started to go say things like, you know, like in front of him I would say like, you know, I do feel that sometimes people shouldn't be late, that kind of thing, you know. Then he would turn back and say like, oh, you know, I don't like those people who like they play games, then after at the end they take pictures, and then they don't share about how they win the game, because they want to keep winning the game. You know, obviously that was directed at me, because I do tend to take pictures and put long paragraphs beside in Facebook posts about the whole history of the game and like Matthew's Arabian Nights stories and all that. So we already had, you can tell that it was devolving into a situation that was going to come to a head, alright? And so, those who give him a plus, to give credit where credit is due, he did many times with his bike send me back, because we both live in the East, and I appreciate that. I cannot deny, I totally appreciate. Saved me hours of my life on travel, and allowed me to stay late at a lot of games, to play games over past midnight and everything, because public transport stops here about that time, alright? And I appreciate that, I totally did. And that's why, to be absolutely honest, many of the little things, you know, it almost felt like you do me some good, so I'm going to repay that favor by being honest with you. And then the big thing happens, alright? This all started as, what happened was, a guy in the group, which is one of my favorite people to play in that group with, he had bought the D&D starter set, the new 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons starter set, and he wanted to play the campaign. And you know, I've talked to him in person before, like I don't mind being the DM or whatever. And so the guy said, you know what? If you don't mind being a DM, I would like to be a player, because obviously that guy always is a DM. So I said, like, you know, hey, absolutely, because I love the new D&D 5th edition. So it's so simple, all right, compared to like Pathfinder and everything. So we all were talking about it in the group, and a few people said, oh my god, D&D, yeah, sure. So we got this group together. We had 4 players and me, the DM. I took the thing, I went home, I wrote out hours planning the whole thing, fitting in, you know, board game references into the campaign and everything. All right, and at this point, there's over 1.5 weeks to prepare. The first thing that the owner did was he put up in the WhatsApp group to all the players, like, this is the link to go make your characters. All right, now, especially in a D&D campaign, I want dedicated people. All right, and I already, like I said already, I already had history with this guy being lazy. And I knew the D&D campaign had prepared characters, but I wanted to make sure I could, you know, weed off, basically, pay if he didn't want to put in the effort. All right. So I didn't tell him there was prepared characters. I just let the thing stand. That go make the characters. Here's the thing: everybody else made their characters. You know, or either they found out about the prepared characters and they took, which is totally fine, because at least, again, research. If you just did the easiest of research, you know there were prepared characters. He, of course, didn't bother. And I started as days went, I think about 1 or 2 days went by, and I started to go, oh my god, this guy is really not going to do anything. Alright? And I started to get worried because I knew my temper was going to explode. So I put out a message, you know, saying that please make your character. You know, and I even put out a very clear post directed at him. I even put his name there, all right, and saying that, you know, Pei, if you no worries if you don't feel like you wanna make a character is too lengthy a process or whatever. Don't worry, just back out. You can play at some other game or whatever, all right. But please don't turn up without a character. You know, not just please don't turn up unprepared, basically. And I still have that message saved, alright? Just to prove it if anybody wants to see it. Guess what? He doesn't reply at all to it. And throughout the days I'm waiting for the reply, it doesn't come, you know, and you see, I don't want to get it to a head into a flame war on the WhatsApp group, because who knows, he might actually have prepared, and it would have been wrong of me to scold him if he actually was in the process of doing it, right? So the day came, the day of the campaign. It was a Monday. I usually am never late. I purposely turned up late that day, because I was telling him, here's the thing, people watching me might think that I love confrontation. I don't, alright? And I was telling myself, you know what, if I turn up and he somehow, some way, maybe someone made his character for him, I'll be pissed, but I'll just let it slide. So I turn up late, about 10 minutes, alright? And I sit down and trust me, I am worried, because I know I won't be able to control myself if, you know, if he didn't prepare his character. So I sit down, I remember very clearly, I put down my book, alright, and I go, okay, tell me about your characters. And he turns to the owner of the game, and he goes, okay, help me make my character. And I just exploded. It was one of those things where I snapped. You know, this is if you hear my terrible tales of gaming horror, you know, there are people I don't like, but I never snapped before like that, where I literally I wasn't shouting, but I was definitely speaking loudly, alright? Where I just snapped and I go, what do you mean? You mean you literally haven't prepared nothing? Alright, this is bullshit. Alright, you can't, and everybody was like trying to calm me down. They're like, oh, you know, this and that. And my big problem was that he had 1.5 weeks to prepare. He saw the message that, you know, I literally put his name there saying that, you know, if you don't want to prepare, don't come. Alright, it's okay, don't worry about it. And he didn't prepare. He literally did not bother to even say, like, you know what, I don't want to make the character, so it's okay. He didn't even do any of that. He turned up, and on top of that, the more insulting fact was that even if you don't respect me as a DM, that's fine. Now this guy's gonna have to make the character for you, and while the rest of us are literally gonna have to sit there and wait for your character to be made. I gave it to him, and then he turns to me, he goes like, "Don't play, oh?" You know, and I was like, "No shit, Sherlock. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you." And then I calmed down because everybody was looking so uncomfortable. I just went, you know, I'm gonna forgive this, all right, but next time no more. And he's like, "Oh, I'm not playing." It's like I could give a shit. And of course dang it, because I really wanted to continue this campaign, but by then it was gone. It was gone. The whole, we went through one session. I just basically told myself this is not going through. Sooner or later I just passed the book back to the owner, and from then on I just said that I'm not going to deal with this guy. I'm not going to turn up you guys, and I just told the group that they didn't have to choose. All right, that it was my choice. I didn't want to deal with this guy anymore. All right, and from then, you know, he continued to go in the group and all that. And of course, my big problem was that I had invited him to 2 other groups that I go to, and you know, there was always this awkwardness. Like whenever he was going to turn out, I was like, "Oh God's sake!" Those are the reasons I have problems with him. All right, and here's the thing: I'll put it out there. Maybe it's me, but I am not willing to put up with him anymore, and that's just it. So, in conclusion, moral of the story. All right, put some effort into your games. If you're not going to, sooner or later, someone's going to call you out. And if it's not someone like me, it's going to be a situation where it's going to be even more awkward with people who don't want to, offend people, because when they start talking, the situation has gotten to a head to quite a level. I mean, this is one guy who, rare times as a gamer, I mean, just literally in the weird context of in a game itself, it's actually okay, meaning that just in game, play with him, finish the game, go home. You know, no interaction whatsoever in terms of other than in the game. He's okay. But my problem with him was I don't like him as a person. I cannot trust this guy. This is a guy who, in terms of like, you know, Vietnam soldier stories where the guy got your back, this guy would literally talk about how much he's going to protect you, he's going to carry you back if you're shot and all that. And when time comes for him to do it, he will make any excuse to just like, "Oh, you're short. Oh, you know, I didn't carry you back because I didn't see you. You know, just when it comes time to him to perform, it's not gonna happen." And so I just don't respect or trust this guy as a person. All right. So, thank you very much. Till next word.